Bonjour, I'm Rob Coleman. I'm the creative director at Industrial Light and Magic in Sydney, Australia. I'm Canadian. I was born and raised in Toronto, but I went to Concordia University in Montreal to study animation. And when I was in my second year, we were told that across town at the University of Montreal, they were inventing what would become Softimage. So they came over, and Daniel Lanois was with them, came over to show us the prototype of what would become Tony de Peltrie. This was an enormous moment in my life because prior to that, I had wanted to be a stop-motion animator, posing puppets and keyframing animation. But I wasn't very good at it. In fact, I was pretty bad at it. And when I saw what they were doing with what would become Softimage, this was keyframable puppet animation inside the computer. And I realized that this is what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. The rest of my classmates didn't really understand, they didn't really get it. I went back to Toronto. I'm Anglophone. I couldn't get a job in Montreal. This was in the 1980s when there was some talk of Quebec wanting to separate from Canada, and as an Anglophone I had to go back to Toronto, which was my hometown. But the benefit of that was because Alias was developing its software in Toronto. And all of that leads to 1993 when I read that Industrial Light and Magic built the dinosaurs in Alias and they animated them in Softimage, and I knew both packages. So when I attended SIGGRAPH 1993 in Anaheim, I pre-wrote to ILM, sent my reel, and said, I know both of these animation packages. They responded. I had an interview, and I got hired 30 years ago at ILM because I knew Softimage.
What's this?
A local. Let's get out of here before more droids show up.
More? More did you speak?
We had many challenges on The Phantom Menace. I had been the animation supervisor on Men in Black, and I'd supervised 200 shots. George Lucas came to ILM and said he had 2,000 shots in this new Star Wars film. So the scale of the project was enormous. But I remember one line in the script specifically, which said, "The Gungan army marches out to war." We had no way to do that. We did not have a crowd system. We could maybe load 8 characters into a scene. This scene needed hundreds, if not thousands of characters. So week after week, we would have a production meeting, and every week the first agenda item, can we get the movie done? No. Month after month. Now our R&D team were trying their best to develop something, but it was getting late into production, and I was starting to get heart palpitations because I thought, we're never going to be able to do the Gungan battle. But ILM being ILM, everyone rallied around it, put our best brains on it, and they did develop a system that we were able to use. So it was an ongoing worry, but we were able to achieve all of the creative challenges that George Lucas put in front of us for that film.
I'm sorry. Was that your auntie?
Men in Black was an amazing project to work on. Our visual effects supervisor on that film was Eric Brevig, who was one of the most gifted and talented visual effects supervisors I've worked with. The movie was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, who's a pretty wacky guy, and it was a very fun set to be on. The actors were great to interact with. We were asked in that film to collaborate with Rick Baker, one of the best makeup artists, Hollywood makeup artists. He created all the amazing latex and silicone creatures, including Mikey. So Mikey is the alien we meet early in the movie who's hidden underneath a Mexican refugee who's trying to escape the border police. He gets caught. He then reveals himself to be the alien. He was both a man in a suit, rubber suit, but as soon as he roars to scare the border guys, he becomes computer graphics. So he was animated by Tim Harrington and myself. So Tim did the big roar shot, and then I animated Mikey running away. So there's a handoff in one shot. We go from a practical or animatronic character to a fully CG character. I think it's seamless. It works really well. There were other characters that were also animatronics, so we call them the worm guys. They're in the coffee room and they're smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. They're animatronics, but when everyone's leaving the station and they're exiting, and there's a wide shot where the character actor Rip Torn is looking down at them. They're CG, animated by Steve Nichols, as they're leaving with their luggage and their boxes of cigarettes. They're all computer generated.
There's only one way off of this planet, baby, and that's through me.
Rick Baker and his team spent a lot of time on that creature, and it was all controlled by hydraulics, and they rolled it out on the set, and they did their best to get the performance. But unfortunately, because it was so heavy, when they moved the arms, it would move and it would shake a bit, and it would move and it would shake a bit, and that was not the vision of the director. And so we had one intensive weekend where we had been shooting all week, and then they shut down the production, and Eric Brevig, the visual effects supervisor from ILM, and I sat with Barry Sonnenfeld. We then figured out, if we had a certain amount of time, we could go and create a digital character that could handle everything. We had initially already planned to have some shots, just as those other characters, be a combination of animatronic and computer graphics. In this case, we were now being asked to create the entire character in computer graphics, and they took the opportunity to redesign the face as well at that point. So its face changed, its heads changed, because story point was that, this is spoilers for a movie that came out a long, long time ago. Edgar Bug swallows Tommy Lee Jones' character at one point. The design of the animatronic head was not going to allow that to happen. With the computer graphics character, we could have him swallow him up. Those are the events that happened. We had already started building part of the body, because there was a point where Will Smith was going to have to jump onto it. The bug tries to escape up to the old spaceships. And we knew there were going to be scenes when Will Smith had to grab onto, and the animatronic was never going to be able to crawl up. So we knew those shots were going to be computer graphics. So look, it's a long time ago, so I don't remember. I think we were a long way in building the body. The main thing was redesigning the head. I would be lying if I told you a time, but it would have been several or many weeks for us to have been able to do that. But it didn't prevent us from shooting the live action plates, which we would later combine with the computer graphics. So we continued the shoot just 2 days. I remember we were there Saturday and Sunday just problem solving, and then we started up the shoot again, but they removed the animatronic and we brought in, stand-ins, so the eye lines worked for the actors. But other than that, we were fine.
Need to ease up out my face for something bad happened to you.
Look, I've been doing this for a very long time. Some of the work I've done is dated. We did the best we could at any time. And I think I don't know why, I think some characters, the more exotic characters age better, because as long as we've animated them with weight, that they have they feel like they're there and they're lit well, there's nothing to say that the audiences of today, will have any problem with them. So for example, 1993, Jurassic Park, those dinosaurs are incredible, because ILM, this predates me, ILM had put the time and effort and care into creating the movement performances, but also the lighting and compositing. And because we don't have dinosaurs we can look at every day, we can't say, oh, it doesn't look right. Where I think some creatures and, digital human beings and stuff that were done just a few years ago don't hold up, because we're used to looking at people and animals all the time. We have a much more critical eye. So I think there's, they use the phrase in English, a willing suspension of disbelief, where you're willing, you go to the movies and you just allow it to wash over you. I see some of our old work and I cringe, because I know I can do better now, but I also know, and I don't beat myself up about it, because I did the best at the time with the talent and technology that I had, 20 years, 25 years, whatever project it was.
I like this gun.
So it's an honor to be the co-chair of the Electronic Theater. I have a long history of going to SIGGRAPHs, going back all the way to 1992 in Chicago, which was the first SIGGRAPH I went to see. And I still remember seeing the Electronic Theater there and being absolutely blown away. And the reason I was is because this is pre-internet. We didn't get to see what everybody else was doing around the world. You had to go to SIGGRAPH to see the latest innovations in computer graphics and computer science. So sitting there and watching the work of Pixar and PDI and R. Greenberg of the day was mind-opening, because I had only my little window, and it was an informed window in that I was exposed already to Softimage and Alias, but only within the Canadian studios that I knew. Once I got to SIGGRAPH, I was introduced to certainly the American studios, but the world studios as well. So when I was asked to be the co-chair for this year's Electronic Theatre and Computer Animation Festival, the goal for me is looking at it from an audience member's eye, not from an animation supervisor's eye. We're looking at, is it a compelling story? Does it have interesting visuals? Does it use the technology in an interesting way? And so the pre-selection committee, and there were a number of people because we had close to 350 submissions, they were coached on a number of categories to grade each short from a 1 to a 5, and each short obviously ended up with slightly different numbers, which then gave us an overall number for each short. And then those were rolled up to the jury, and then the jury, myself and Herman, my co-chair, looked at all of those shorts and then discussed whether we felt that some shorts were more deserving to be included than others. And so we ended up, I think, with a really interesting selection, and I'm very, very happy to see the work that's being done out there in the world right now. The best, or the top student film is a film called Travailler. I learned about Les Gobelins back in the 1990s. I have seen repeatedly top-level student films coming out of France. All I can assume is, and I've done a little bit of looking into it, is that there are a number, 3 or more, top-level film schools in France that really are behind their animation programs. They clearly have experienced staff members who have put together a program that's always a number, like 6 filmmakers on each short, and they have a very high quality bar that clearly that group of students needs to get to. What I love about the French, the shorts that I see, is they're all different styles. Some are hand-drawn, some are fully 3D computer graphics, but they all, in many, many cases, have very compelling, well-crafted stories. So I take my hat off to them because they're doing something great. There are schools all over the world. You know, there's great schools in Australia, in the United States, in Canada, in Europe. But it does seem that every year, and I have to think that it's also that they have recognized that they will attract more students if they have a good marketing team that pushes their shorts out to all the festivals. So they're being smart about it, both at the faculty and school level. You do great work, it attracts more students, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So well done to them. I've got animators who are, I call them ambidextrous. They can do visual effects style animation, and they can do deeply compelling character performance. The panel was organized by Mike Seymour, who is one of the best interviewers I've experienced over my career. Mike's interviewed me many, many times, and we've had long discussions both during the interviews and after the interviews. He's very passionate about computer graphics and storytelling. He comes from a compositing and CG background, and so he's he's an interesting guy to talk to. So when he asked me to be part of it, I immediately said yes. He wanted to talk about storytelling, using the latest technology and how do we, and my other panelists come from slightly different backgrounds than I do. And that's always a great panel when you've got people who come at it something from different angles. It just gives the audience hopefully a broader perspective on what do we do and why do we do it. So I'm always happy to talk about the craft. I'm always happy to talk about process. And so I was hopefully just sharing, just some anecdotes, some stories, and some of my own approach on how I tackle. For me, it's the big animated features, the big visual effects movies, and now the streaming shows we do for Disney Plus and Lucasfilm.